Teachers do an awesome job of, fixing holes in the system or sort of rising to the moment to make sure that the kids in their class do get support. But it's to the point now where teachers know that they're not actually providing good level of support to all their students all the time. That hurts hearts.
This episode of Bring Back the Porch, brought to you by Bernie Leahy, River Street Realty. Let's get you home. And joining me on the porch this morning, and it is the morning of October 23rd, and I only say that because the Alberta Legislature is reconvening today, and one of the important things that they'll be looking at is the current labor dispute in Alberta among the teachers. And joining me is the ATA Local Number 1 President for Medicine Hat, Mike Jerred, and from the ATA Number 39, the Catholic Board of Education, Deanna Burzminski. Welcome.
Thank you.
I'm pretty sure you'd rather not be here. You'd rather be in the classroom.
Yeah, with the kids for sure.
Yeah. So how did we get to where we are now? 3 weeks into a strike almost.
Do you want to take that one?
Well, I think that if we look historically what has happened over more than a decade, we've seen that the chronic underfunding, which we thought should have been corrected along the way, and as things have deteriorated to the level that we're at right now, I think that that put us in a position that if we didn't take any kind of labor action, that things weren't going to be changing at all. So I think that a lot of us thought that it wouldn't get to this point. We prayed that it wouldn't get to this point, but certainly it did. What
is the biggest issue? We see a lot of back and forth in the media regarding advertising. The government's presenting its side. The ATA is this side. Is classroom size the big issue? Is that the deal breaker?
Classroom size and classroom complexity, they certainly go hand in hand, because class sizes without complexity, the system can handle. But when you start to add those higher needs students into the mix, it changes the dynamics of the classroom.
How so?
Just the ability for teachers to respond to their students in a proper way. I mean, teachers do an awesome job of fixing, holes in the system or sort of rising to the moment to make sure that the kids in their class do get support. But it's to the point now where teachers know that they're not actually providing good level of support to all their students all the time. That hurts hearts, and ultimately it shouldn't be that way. We should, because of the state of our province and the resources, if we took a different stance with public education and said we'd like to return to the best system in the world. We were just there. We know things would change. I mean, one of the most striking things that I've seen over the course of this campaign is that when we compare our classroom numbers to national averages or to some of the best funded systems in the country, the difference in overall teaching staff is fairly staggering, right? And I don't it's actually quite shocking to see that difference.
So we have less teachers teaching more students in Alberta than compared to other provinces?
Correct.
Okay. What kind of a strain does that put on a teacher on a day-to-day basis when you're facing a classroom of, I don't know what the numbers are here in Medicine Hat, but when you have a large group of students like that, and you know that you've got to put your finger in this hole over here and then this, you're like the little boy trying to stop the water, hold the water back. It must be deflating after a while.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like if I look at how things have kind of evolved with movement towards more inclusive education, where in the past I would have had EAs or educational assistants that were sitting with certain students that had higher needs, those are few and far between. So we have fewer EAs that are trying to manage kids with more complex behaviors, and sometimes what's happening is that they're trying to cluster groups together, and it's not necessarily effective, but yet my class size potentially could be at 30 or 32, and I could have 6 to 7 kids that have individual program plans that are in place and no EA in the classroom. And then we have kids as well that could be English as a second language. So if you actually, even though our classes at my high school are around 83 minutes long, if you were trying to do the math after I taught a lesson, how much time could I spend actually working with any of the kids, it's minuscule.
Okay. What are the class sizes like? I'm sure there's probably a difference between the public and the Catholic board. We know the numbers are high in Calgary and Edmonton because of the pressures on population growth. What about here in Medicine Hat?
So Medicine Hat, and I mean, I attend our annual budget review with the Medicine Hat Public School Board. And so because the funds aren't really changing, every year there's 3 or 4 full-time teachers that basically come off the board, and then that generally gets distributed throughout the system. And so class sizes have been increasing. I think we feel the weight of the 3-year rolling average. We don't have population spike like Calgary and Edmonton in that corridor. But the lowest per pupil funding manifests itself differently all over the province and by even within our city at different schools. So K through 6 looks different than a junior high, looks different than a high school.
Are the needs different at the different levels too?
Absolutely.
So for, say, an elementary school, what would be the optimal size?
Well, that would probably be in the class caps that we just presented in our offer back to the government. I mean, Deanna and I are both high school teachers. We recognize the value in that, focusing on early learning in that K through 6. If they can actually get some literacy supports and exit their elementary years, we know in high school and junior high that they're going to be far better off staying within the system and having success. And so I think that those early years are tremendously important, and to cap those class sizes for the little ones so they can have the teacher's attention, that I just think it's incredibly valuable and difficult to argue against.
It's like anything else. You have to start with a good foundation.
And
That's
what
right.
we have found as well is that where we've lost teachers, so there's been like an attrition rate, so we're having retired teachers not being replaced, and that maybe at the elementary schools, and then suddenly even maybe the class sizes weren't large, but then they're combining classes, so now you have a 2-3 split, but then also with very like a spectrum of kids with needs, and again, no supports or very few supports in the classrooms for the educational assistants, and it's creating like a situation where no one is benefiting in the classroom, so no kids' needs are being met.
How many classes do we have that are split where you see a teacher covering 2 grades?
So certainly, like in our division, we have a smaller sized schools, like smaller like footprint of schools. So we found that that potentially, depending on which side of town, looking at how even the population of Medicine Hat is more on the south side of town as opposed to the north side. So we've seen more split classes on this side of the river. So it wouldn't be uncommon to have 2 or 3 within one of our smaller schools, which, again, my own children had to be in a split class at St. Francis, and that was not optimal.
Yeah. Michael, you mentioned that you had presented an offer to the government with cap sizes on classrooms, and the government has said, we're not going to talk about that. So you're diametrically opposed there, so how do we get past that?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, like Deanna said, we didn't want to get to this point. I mean, the path we're on right now is probably the least preferable of all. I believe we have public support, and so what we actually need is for the public to make sure that their MLAs understand that they believe it's reasonable that there are class caps. Our proposal to the government was a K through 12 proposal. Just like when you sell a house, you would start with your highest selling price, and you expect the other party to come back and negotiate. That's not happening. I would suspect that if the government came back and said, we can't fix the system overnight because it has taken 10, 15 years to get here, but we will address, let's say, K through 6, that would be, teachers would see that as a positive. They would see the intent, and we take that into consideration when we're being asked to have a look at these proposals from the government. It is unfortunate they're not willing to talk about it. I mean, just about every other province in Canada has class cap sizes in their collective agreements, and so it's not unprecedented in any way. And realistically, like I said, I think those K through 6, those little guys, they deserve that type of protection. Without it, we do run into scenarios where you have those joint classes or split classes, and that's just a numbers game. It's because they have to keep the number of students high based on the lack of funding, and can't make decisions about maybe having a class of, say, 16 or 17 grade ones and just keep them grade one. They have to top up, split that class.
You mentioned public support. Do you think that it is in your favor?
I do. I mean, we have recent statistics that we were given just last week that tells us that we've got, depending on who's asked, but people generally believe that the teachers in their communities are telling them the truth about the classroom conditions. We have north of 60% public support according to the polls. And so, yeah, we do believe we have public support. It just seems like it's falling on deaf ears.
And I think one of the stats that came out of that polling was that when parents were asked, or when the respondents were asked about class sizes, what they were actually saying they thought would be reasonable class sizes was actually in line with where we were hoping to get as a progression over the next few years. Because I feel that oftentimes Danielle Smith will address it and say, well, we can't do everything now. And the ATA isn't saying that it needs to be now. There is a progressive plan to have more realistic classroom conditions, but there's just an unwillingness on their part to come back to the table.
That's the thing. How do you negotiate when you know that the other side has the hammer? They can just bring it down, back to work. There you go. We're done talking.
It's not really a negotiation.
No, it's not. So what do we do? How does the ATA fight that? How do, the people that are watching this, if they support you, how do they get involved in the battle?
Well, we would say contact your MLA, right? I mean, it is now in the political arena, and so they require political pressure to make any changes to their decision making. And it's just tremendously important that folks step up now. I believe this is an assault on public education. I don't think this is just a negotiation any longer. There's some ideology at play here, and our premier is on record and has written in an editorial that she believes that the better way to go would be to fund charter and private schools, and I think we're just seeing the beginning of that.
Okay. As I sit and watch the Blue Jays in the playoffs, I see lots of ads from the government of Alberta talking about how much money they're offered, how much the class sizes, the teachers, the new schools, and somebody just looking at that would go, that sounds reasonable, but I'm sure there's the devil's in the details.
Well, the new schools are not part of our agreement. I mean, it's part of Education Alberta to actually, build these buildings, capitalize them, and kind of match our population, recognizing that there's challenges there. The 3,000 teachers, it does sound like a good number. It is 1,000 teachers a year. There's well over 2,000 schools in Alberta. And so when you start doing the math to actually think about what that would mean for folks in Medicine Hat, we don't expect to see any of those teachers or those EAs. They would be largely focused on that Calgary, Red Deer, Edmonton corridor. And so in terms of what's best for children, students and teachers in Medicine Hat and smaller communities, we just need really an increase in base funding, and those class caps would allow for protection and also force the government to fund the education system better.
Strike in Alberta last time, but teachers was 2002, if I'm remembering correctly, and I believe there was a report done after that to see what the status of the education system is in Alberta. And I think that that's something that might be looked at here as this resolves itself too. If they were to sit down and look at it, what would they find from a third-party view?
From the result of the 2002?
No, well, if they did the same exercise, if they looked at the funding, if they looked at the class sizes, not listening to either the ATA or the government, a third-party independent review, what do you think they would find?
Well, interestingly enough, the government stopped having us report class sizes. Was it just after COVID or prior to COVID?
2019.
So if you don't collect the data, then you have nothing to compare it to. So like when we look at the increase of funding that's going to private and charter schools. We're the highest of all the provinces in Canada for the funding to private and charter schools, but then the lowest funded for public schools. And then now there's no data to suggest that our class sizes are changing because they stopped collecting the data, so the reporting isn't done. So it'd be interesting. It's not that we don't have the data, like we do know how many kids we have within the classroom, but it would certainly not show well that if you think between 2002 and where we are now, you would hope that there would have been improvement, but we've seen just a continual deterioration, less funding, and to the point that we are where we are today.
I got to play the devil's advocate here for a minute. There would be those, and you've probably seen it on social media, who say teachers are well paid. What are they complaining about? Because I see that number on the ad, $117,000 a year. Well, that sounds wonderful, and I get 2 months off in the summer and every holiday. And where do I sign up?
Except I don't make that. I have been teaching for 32 years, and I wouldn't have stayed in this profession if I didn't love it. So what I do know is that we have a scale, and it's based on your years of education and then your years of service within the classroom. And yes, there is an incremental increase up to year 10. But if you were to ask me where my wage has gone since 2011, I could tell you that it hasn't gone up. And that if you're thinking about, everything from inflation and things like that, it hasn't kept pace. So looking at the fact that most teachers probably have 5 to 6 years of university education, I feel, and that we are continually doing professional development, oftentimes at our own out of our own pockets, I don't feel the compensation has kept up with what we've been expected to do.
Did we learn anything from what happened in Saskatchewan last year, where there was a strike, rotating strikes? The class size issue was one of the things that was big over there. They eventually did come to an agreement. Are we taking, or can we take anything from what happened in Saskatchewan and apply it in Alberta?
I think we can. I mean, certainly we kept an eye on what was happening over there. I'm not 100% sure of how they closed off their negotiation, but my understanding is that when they did go to arbitration, that is when the class size discussion actually was brought back into their contract discussions. And so that's positive. I mean, we don't know which path we're on today, but it is possible that an arbitrator, given the opportunity and not have the government sort of fence off the discussion in a way where we can't address class size and complexity, it would be interesting to have another party look at that and say, actually, this is a reasonable ask at the negotiating table, and they would potentially bring it back into the collective.
Do you see this moving towards mediation or arbitration?
Do you want to?
That's a $64 question, I know, but
I think right now there's such an unwillingness. I think when you look at how the government is treating us within their ad campaigns, it's targeted and it tells one side of the story, and we can do Daniel Smith style math and try to say that this is what class sizes look like, but we all know that when you if you misrepresent numbers enough time and you put it out in the public, then the public starts to believe what they hear repetitively, and I feel that where we've been continually willing to come to the table and talk about things and come up with a reasonable progression of how to deal with everything from teacher-student ratios in the classroom and wages. I feel that the government has it's been done in vain, because if they can't come, if no one can meet at the table and actually have a discussion, because nothing from the funding point from the government's going to change to address that, then it's just an exercise in futility. So I feel that it'll be interesting to see what happens on Monday.
Yeah, that's when potential back-to-work legislation would be introduced in Edmonton. Probably take a couple of days to get through the machinery, and maybe the students are back in school the first Monday in November.
It's one of the timelines.
Yeah, one of the timelines. And then the ATA has a decision to make, a tough decision to make. Do you abide by the legislation, or do you fight it? And how do you fight it?
Well, I think we would have to fight it. We'd have to fight it legally. one of the options is, ignoring that back to work legislation and still staying off on strike. I'll tell you right now, the teachers don't have that in them. We're not lawbreakers by nature. And so that's just not a possibility. So yeah, unfortunately, we are heading for that legislative piece. I think the government's indicated now that they have no intention of returning to the table. And so that is the path we're on. Mm-hmm. That has a number of different ways that it can look in terms of forced arbitration with fences. They can forego any arbitration and basically legislate us back to work in law. None of these are ideal scenarios because it should have been a negotiation. I don't believe the government has ever negotiated with us in good faith, now that I look back at the history of this exercise that's been going on for well over a year.
The other third party in this that we haven't talked about are the students. Have you had any idea of how this is impacting them?
I teach grade 12 diploma exam courses, and I care a lot about my kids, so it's hard to be on this side of the table because I don't think any of us would choose to do this.
No. The university preparation, the diploma examinations, we hear that some deadlines for early applications have already passed. I'm thinking of I'm a post-secondary education institution and I'm not getting any applications. I will simply just move the deadline. Do we know if that can happen? Is that possible for these kids who have already missed the deadline?
I think that when it comes to post-secondary, they certainly have different ways that they can deal with what's going to happen with our students. And I know that one of the concerns for sure is kids thinking that they're going to come back after having a month of no learning and then thinking about diploma exams, because those diploma exams, even though they're less than they used to be, if that's 30% of your mark and you're competing against provinces where kids haven't had labor disruptions, who's getting the placements in our universities? So it's huge. And I'm a parent, and any time away from the classroom is not good for the kids. But then at some point, you have to realize that if we can't even provide the supports for our kids when we're in the classroom because our class sizes are so complex and the numbers are so large, then at some point we have to fight for that. And that's what we're doing.
Yeah. The unfortunate part is that the kids are caught in the middle. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anything else that you wanted to talk about before we say goodbye?
Just that, we've had a number of walks here in the city this week, and it's been quite healthy to have folks honk at us when we're walking through the streets, feeling that public support. It's awesome. Because this is a strange time. I mean, teachers get up every morning and with the intention of doing great things with their students. No one goes to work, trying to have a bad day or without their students' best intentions in mind. So this is a really unnatural place to be, and we really appreciated the public support and hope we can rely on it as we go through this next week to 2 weeks in negotiation or lack thereof with this government.
I'm just wondering, too, if we still had local negotiations, if you were able to sit down with the Catholic Board of Education and you were able to sit down with the Medicine School District 76, would we have an agreement?
It all depends on who's sitting across the table from you. So you can have successful years and less successful years. I think your local has had quite a few successful years. And I don't think that's why you're number one, but I think you were number one for a while. But I also think too is that one of the things about unifying the grid, there are good things to having central table bargaining because there are certain things that shouldn't have to be negotiated by every local all the time. It'll be interesting to see what happens after this because. There is still a place for local bargaining, but I feel like there's fewer things for us that are left to be able to be negotiated.
Yeah. It used to be when the boards had the power to set the tax rate for your own division, so they knew how much money they had and everybody knew how much money there was. Now that it's under the provincial control, things are different. But as I always say here at there's only one taxpayer. So it doesn't matter which pocket it comes out of. It's still coming out of my pocket. But it is a difficult time for everybody in Alberta right now, and we'll see how things play out over the next little while. Mike Jerred, Deanna Burzminski, thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.